Right, this feedback I'm doing is a video feedback because I think there are concepts that we can explore here that are going to be useful to everyone when they're working with human anatomy in general, but certainly when you're working with poses. And I think what you've got here is looking really nice already. There's a lot through here that I buy and that I think works well, but there are some concepts that we can explore here that are going to help with this and going to help with a whole bunch of things. One simple thing is, I would say it wouldn't hurt to stick a head on, because if you did, you would see that your neck is actually too long and a little bit too thin from the side. And you might go, well, that's not the point of what I'm doing here. I asked you about the arms, just tell me about the arms. But the idea is that, you know, everything is relative to whatever is near it, right? That's proportions, especially, are based off of what is around them. So by addressing the neck, you might find that that actually changes things in there. And it can sometimes be as extreme as you change something in the foot and that affects how you see the head. So just being aware of that, I think, is at least useful. Because then even if the crop that you wanted on your sculpt was to be like, okay, there's no head here, you might put one in just so then you can reappraise how this is all working, and then you can take it off again afterwards. And, you know, I said that maybe the neck would feed into, you know, how this is all working, and actually it would, because what's happening here is this is the trapezius muscle that's currently activated because it's lifting the scapulus up, so then that would affect all of that, which of course feeds into the neck, which is going to affect the neck. So by paying attention to the head, it's going to help you understand the neck. By paying attention to the neck, it's going to help you understand the shoulders. So there becomes like this chain effect. But this isn't the primary thing that I want to draw your attention to with this sculpt. The ideas, the key concepts that I want to nail here are, firstly, well, when we're trying to figure out the arms, we can look at this like a chain, right? So the first step of the chain is in the torso, and then the torso muscles, the ones that affect the arm at least, grab hold of the scapula, which is going to be here. So this is our first link, is from the torso to the scapula. Then all the muscles, without exception, there are 4 muscles on the scapula, all of them go to the arm. So that's the second link. And then the muscles of the arm go to the forearm, right? That's your third link. Muscles of the forearm go to the hand, muscles of the hand go to the fingers. So you have this chain effect moving down. And that's going to help you with the entirety of the arm, but certainly here, because it's going to put a spotlight on, okay, well then every single muscle here is going to the arm, so then I just need to know exactly where it's going to the arm, and then I can start to solve that problem. But you can't solve it until you found the scapula itself, because these muscles are all on the scapula. So this takes you to what is always the most important thing in any figurative artwork you're doing, which is find the bones. And for the most part, like I can see where your scapulas are, but I'm just going to define them a little bit more here. So we've got the spine of the scapula there, that's a true bony landmark, and then we've got that medial border of the scapula through there, not a true bony landmark, but in this case, especially when the arms get pulled out, becomes quite... Now here's a rule that's going to save your life when you're trying to figure out exactly what is the scapula doing when the arms are raised, because that throws so many people. And well, you know that it's rotating outwards, right? So that's the first thing you're going to learn, is the scapula is, you know, naturally going to be like that, and then it rotates outwards to this position. But how much does it rotate? Well, this is the spine of the scapula. When the arms are fully raised like this, the spine of the scapula will be more or less parallel with your humerus. And the humerus bone is maybe not easy to find as the bone, but the direction of it is super easy to find because it's the direction of the upper arm there, right? So that's the direction of that. That means the direction of the spine of the scapula. It's going to be more or less the same. So that tells me that you're pretty close there, but you could rotate your scapula even more if you wanted to. And as you rotate it more, it's going to push outwards there, and the scapula itself will push out there. Okay, so I found this and this. These are the 2 key things that I need to find in the scapula before I can think about anything else with the scapula. The body itself, not so important because that's covered by muscle, right? So you're always prioritizing, like the bones are the most important thing, but from an artistic point of view, it's the way that the bones impact the surface form. Everything else we can kind of ignore, right? Doctors don't have that luxury, but artists do. So now that I've found that, then I just go, okay, well, First step, let's worry about this this part of the chain, the first link in the chain, the muscles that go from the body to the scapula, and then I'll worry about the second link in the chain, the scapula going to the arms, and then I'm not going to carry on with the third and fourth links for this video. It's not necessary. So, trapezius muscle, we've already touched on it. This is grabbing hold of the scapula, grabs hold of the spine of the scapula, and comes down here, something like this. So, the point of origin of this muscle, all the way down here, points of insertion, spine of the scapula, and the clavicle itself curving around to the front. So large points of origin, large points of insertion. What do we know about muscles that have large points of origin and insertion? Well, they can do multiple things. So in this case, the section above the scapula, remembering that all muscles act on a linear basis, just pulling point A to point B. So here it's pulling that point to that point. What movement is that? That's lifting the scapula up and rotating it around. This section down here, going from there to there, pulls that point to that point, it does what? Pulls the scapula back down again. So this muscle actually antagonistic to itself. So it wants to be stretched out down here and bulged up there. So here I'm going to get out my flatten brush, just flatten all of this off. And there's an interesting nuance that's important with the trapezius, and everyone misses it, or most people do most of the time, which is that it's not glued to the scapula. So when the scapula is in its neutral position, the trapezius covers all of that. But when the scapula rotates around, it pulls itself away from the trapezius. So the trapezius attached to the scapula through here, so that's all going to stay glued to the scapula, but this area down here is going to get left behind, and that means that this medial border of the scapula is going to become more prominent. Make sense? Good, because I'm not going to say it again. There's a whole bunch to cover here, and I don't want this to be a super long video, but your trap's potentially doing something like that, right? And the bottom section of the traps you can always think of as 1, 2, 3 lines. Key mistake is that you just think of that as one line. That's a starting out point, but then you need to break into that. So up here we need to tell the story of compression, and I can do that in a few ways, but one is this area of tendon is going to become more prominent, especially, or the transition is going to become more prominent and sharper as we go from the big muscle to the tendon through there. So as the arm gets raised, we're going to see more of that. And then this is all going to bulge up. There is a little muscle here as well, sitting on the scapula. That's the supraspinatus. That'll sometimes impact the form there, but that's a kind of advanced beat, and it's not that important. Okay, what else do we have in link 1 of our chain? What muscles are going from the body to the scapula? Rhomboids, right? Rhomboids filling this area, pulling the scapulas inwards. So in this case, getting stretched out. We don't need to look into the rhomboids in too much detail here, because they're going to be getting super stretched out and they're going to be diving underneath the trapezius there. We may see a little bit of them. What else do we have that grabs hold of the body and the scapula? Key muscle that people ignore when they shouldn't, the serratus muscle, right? This is the muscle that gives the fingers through here. Now I know you're asking me about the arms when doing this video, but it makes sense that we start from the base of our chain and then work up. So this is the serratus muscle, right? This is going to be going to the bottom of the scapula through there. And so all I need to do is find the bottom of the scapula. Well, it's actually going to the whole inside border of the scapula there. So that line is going to be quite visible. It's going to be impacting the surface form, and then it's going to feed through into these fingers that are grabbing hold of the body. All right, that's an important muscle. I know that most people don't get that at the first explanation of it, but I'm not going to dwell on it now. All I'll say is, if you don't know about the serratus, then study it. And so these 3 muscles, trapezius, rhomboids, and serratus, is pretty much giving us everything that we need to understand the muscles in the first link of our chain. So this is the bit that you're going to be like, okay, this is what I was asking you about. The second link in the chain, the muscles that are going from the scapula to the arm. So let's start at the top and work our way down. I've mentioned the supraspinatus already. You know, if I was to draw in the scapula, we would see that top little triangle, something like that, and then something like that, right? And then the humerus would be articulating through there. More or less, that's what we see in the scapula. So that top triangle there, that's where the supraspinatus sits. We don't really need to know about that. It's pulling the arm up, so that's why we might get that little bulge through there. Supra above, right? Superior to. So the supraspinatus above the spine, and then below the spine we have the infraspinatus. This going to the top of the humerus. So this will be slightly activated in the raising of the arm. This is a naturally flat muscle, so we don't need to do more than that. And then let's keep working our way down. We then have the teres minor. Teres meaning rounded or sausage-like. So the small sausage-like muscle, but it is small. You could go your whole life and never know about it, never study it, and it would still be an okay life, you know? This is going to more or less the same place as the infraspinatus, that is to say the back of the humerus there, so we can do something like that. Now, teres major, this is where stuff gets important, and I can see that you're understanding this pretty well through here. So as we revisit it, teres major going to the front of the arm. So these other muscles go to the back, teres major goes to the front. That does leave a little gap through here, right? That little triangle. So this is like chopsticks, right? One going to the back, one going to the front. What is nipping in between those chopsticks? This is where I see that you're starting to struggle with this. That's the triceps. I never said this was easy. I didn't start this video by saying this stuff was easy. And I would never do this. This is really hard, but it will yield. It just needs, you just need to go through it in this way and just go through muscle by muscle and go, where does it start, where does it finish? So this is deltoids, right? I'm going to get onto that in a minute. Infraspinatus, teres minor, teres major, and then triceps nipping just between those. Now, teres major, typically a pretty rounded muscle, but here it's going to get super stretched out, right? Going to the front of the humerus, fairly far down the humerus. So here it's not activated at all. It's just getting pulled straight. And this muscle sits inside the lats through here. So here's the lats. Lats also getting super stretched out through there. So here we've got teres major and lats. And then the next thing along here is actually, you've got it, coracobrachialis, and then biceps. Yes, you've got it. You're fairly close here. It's just the triceps that are screwing you a little bit, you know, when you're mapping out of this area. So through here, biceps and coracobrachialis going to the coracoid process of the scapula. So that's the little beak of the scapula that sticks through the body. So if you can find that, and if you're doing it digitally, then of course you can just make the scapula separately. Then you know exactly where the coracoid process is, and you know exactly where these muscles should be coming from and going to. And then you can just draw them between those two lines. Now, then we would have pecs. Pecs I'm not going to say much about because it looks like you've nailed that pretty well. In this case, pecs getting super stretched out, right? We might see more definition of that because you typically see more definition in muscles that are stretched out. And then deltoids, and the shape of the deltoids is fine, but what you're missing is just how compressed these guys are going to get. So deltoid comprised of 3 heads, medial, anterior, and posterior. So here, when they're super fully activated, you'll start to see the distinction, the divisions between those heads. And then here, that's the bony landmark of our spine of the scapula, right? Specifically the acromion process. And so that's going to be a really deep recession through there because that's bony landmark and muscle is bulging all the way around it. Through here, if you want to, you can start to find some skin compression as well because that tells the story of the tension that's happening here. Okay, and then let me just define where the deltoid is. Always, if in doubt, just drawing everything out, seeing that it all makes sense, and then this is going to help with the triceps, because the triceps here will explode your mind. So what you might want to do is just to flip it around so that you can then map the triceps out in the way that you're more used to seeing them. Here's the triceps tendon, because the arm is super straight. The triceps, which straighten the arm, are going to be fully activated here. So I need to tell the story of that as well. And this is on the inside. We have the 2 heads of the triceps. We have the medial head and the long head. And that should push up, not quite against the biceps, because we have the brachialis in between those. I could keep on working down the arm, and I suspect that you'd want me to because it doesn't get any easier. But I think for the purposes of this video, it makes sense that we just focus on this area through here, just getting as far as as far as the upper arm. But yeah, through here in this area, you definitely want to go through and just draw in all of these forms to see, does that all make sense? You know, is the distance between your biceps and triceps correct? Does it all add up to one, essentially? And you'll only figure that out by drawing it in. Okay, and then at this point here, this would then be just refining and refining all of this, which I don't think would be appropriate for this video because then it'll just go on forever, but hopefully that helps you figure out those main ideas. So here's a before and after. And then at the front, I don't think I've changed too much. Let me just give a tiny little bit of love to stuff at the front, because here these muscles are getting stretched out, and like I mentioned, when muscles are stretched out, that's generally when you see more definition. So maybe we even see like a little bit of the tendon of the biceps through there, something like that. And then, yeah, I find like the pecs, when the arms are raised, it's just like a slab of meat. I'm always surprised how thick that area is. So I just want to revisit that. And then, yeah, when you're working the front view, just don't forget this is the egg shape of the rib cage. Right now, there is going to be a little bit of fat storage there, but generally speaking, when the arms are raised, you really get that curvature in. Okay, yeah, there's some tweaking that we can do through here. I'm sucking this in just because this all has to feel really straight and really pulled out, right? The teres major and the latissimus are really getting stretched out at this point, so we want to be thinking about straight lines. Here, if in doubt, just drawing it again, so I'm just hitting my teres major and latissimus again. And here, the serratus would go right the way up there, but it's rare that you'll see it up there because of the fat that's covering that area. Okay, come on, I'm going to stop. In my head, I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I can do this in 10 minutes. As always, massively overestimating my own speed. But, yeah, so you see just allowing those forms to get a little bit more stretched out, a little bit more tighter to tell the story of that tension that's happening there. And then here, boom, boom, well, you've seen that already. And so I will call it there. I hope that helps.